positional games. Let's work on strategy, positional chess, and I talked about the Silman thinking technique of imbalances. Have you guys ever heard about that? So basically, I guess we can jot them down somewhere. Let's see. I'll share screen. Let me just open up some games. But basically, you're talking about what are the differences between your position and your opponent's position. So it kind of goes two different ways. One way is just the book is called How to Reassess Your Chess. It's a very useful book for understanding middle games. So a lot of it is just how do I assess this position? How do I analyze what's in front of me? So then I know how to what to do from there, right? How to come up with a good plan. So it's just breaking down every component of the position. Obviously material, someone's up a knight or a pawn or something, king safety, space. If you push I'm actually going to show you guys a bit about that today. Using your pawns to gain like as if it's a fence or a border, gaining territory. You have minor piece battles like knights versus, or someone has the bishop pair, knight versus bishop. So essentially piece activity, whose pieces are better placed. And that's as I'm going to show you tonight, that's really tied into pawn structure. Your pawns essentially enable you. There's a great game where your pawns enable you to get outposts and have avenues for your pieces to use. And we have initiative. Have you guys heard that term, initiative in chess? So who's putting pressure? Who's in the driver's seat essentially? So you want to be the one who's calling the shots. So that's where, for example, giving like Tal, Mikhail Tal would give away a pawn or two all the time just to have the initiative, to be able to put pressure on their opponent. So this initiative, development, kind of similar, but who has more pieces out essentially. Not just pawns, but maybe get your two center pawns out, open up your bishops and your queen, and then get your knights and bishops out quickly, get your rooks out. So if someone's fully mobilized, maybe so the imbalance would be they're ahead in development, but they're behind like 3 pawns. Okay, the 3 pawns may not matter. That might be moot if you're going to checkmate them in 10 moves, right? And then the pawns will matter later on. Or if your king is stripped of pawns, okay, that's different. But in terms of initiative and king, and then that ties into king safety, because whoever has more, you have the initiative, you have development, you have your pieces out, you're maybe sacrificing more things to open up your opponent's king. So obviously material doesn't matter much there. So as you become more and more experienced, a more seasoned chess player, you kind of gain a sense, okay, well, it's worth it for me now to give away material to get something else of value, right? But the key is you have a sense, what are the imbalances, not just material, not just king safety. So when we talk about tactics, we're going for winning pieces and getting checkmates. But so the positional chess is it's about everything. It's about the more nuanced aspects of the game, right? So space, and also control of squares, control of diagonals, piece activity, who's putting pressure, how many pieces you have out, things like that. So all those aspects combine to give you an understanding of what is going on right now in front of me. That's part of it, an assessment. And also, what do I want to achieve, right? So like I want to get that file. I want that file for myself. And you have to look at, okay, how do I achieve that? Maybe I have to sacrifice a pawn. Maybe I have to make some, give away my bishop give away my bishop pair. Now I have 2 knights versus 2 bishops, but I have, so the bishops are really strong that I'm facing, but I have a great file to use. So it's things like that, right? It's these assessments you have to make. So let's just jump into a game. Let's start with the game, and that'll give us a better idea, I think. Okay, so the first one is a famous Capablanca game. Now, have you guys heard of Capablanca? Jose Raul Capablanca?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
He was world champion from Cuba in the early 20th century. Right after, the first champion was Steinitz in the end of the 1800s. Then you had Lasker, and then Capablanca was 1910s, I think, or 1910s to 20s was his peak. Okay, so I'll share screen. You can definitely learn a lot from those classics. I mean, study the modern games too. I'm not saying only study the classics, but it's important to know how he played, because I think he's one of the most instructive players to watch. You just see really clear plans. So let's see. We got Capablanca versus Treball. I think it's 1929. Okay. So we got C4, C6. Now the queen's pawn opening. So we have queen's gambit, and when black goes C6, do you guys know what that's called? Which opening that is?
Slav defense.
Right, and you can see it over here. This is the openings book. So this is the database that Lichess has. And you could use that as well. And that's a good resource. You can actually filter it. So you can do masters, that's the default, or you can do lead chess. So you can, like I have it 2000 and above. So you can say, okay, I want to see only classical games, only 2500 and above. I mean, you want to get as strong as possible, but you also don't want to narrow your pool too much. So probably 2000 or 2200, it'll give you a good idea. But I'll just do masters. So we're going to see 2200 plus rating and how they handle it. All right, so C6 Slav defense. That's a pretty good way to handle it. You just guard your pawn, and you can later on you try and strike back with E5 too, if possible. Okay, so E6. Now the second your opponent goes E6, now they've created this, I call this the iron triangle, right? The Slav setup. So the second they do that, there's a potential problem. What is the potential problem for tray ball here?
Is it that he's blocking in his bishop?
Exactly. So positionally, so now we're talking about piece activity. So Capablanca might try to get the superior amount of piece. So he'd have his counterpart on F1. That could be a game-long strategy. The whole game he could be playing, which is essentially what happens this game. A big part of it is that this bishop becomes awful because it just never gets out. So the second E6 is played, you say, okay, it's a typical move to make. I think it's the second most common. Other than, well, knight F6 is more flexible. But when you do that, you're saying, okay, you're committing for some time to not let your bishop out. So you have to find a way to get it out. So always be thinking from both sides. Think about, okay, what are some potential problems? And you want to make sure that bishop doesn't get out. That's your job. Do it whatever you can to make it hard for them, not just to make your pieces good, but to make their pieces bad. That's a big part of this game. Capablanca just, masterfully carries that out. Okay, so he hits the queen. Bishop blocks, and he takes it. So essentially, he's ridding himself of what could be a bad bishop. So you can play E3. This is common too. But if you play E3, see, now you might have the same problem. So he says, okay, I don't want any problems. I want fluid development. That's a little easier when you're playing with white since you have the first move, right? So you just develop your bishop with tempo, hit the queen, trade it up. Probably the Capablanca. You can see some of the top players here. And you can look at any one of those games, say, oh, I want to see how white won or how black won. You can find some of these games. So you can see the percentage is pretty good. Of 177, we had 29% wins for white, a lot of draws, 13% wins for black. Okay, so queen takes back, knight comes out. And let me know if you guys have any questions. Just chime in if you have any thoughts as we go. So now he goes F5, which is actually becoming more like, do you guys know what opening this is called when you play generally when you have F5, especially with D5, this pawn structure?
It's Stonewall.
Exactly, Stonewall Dutch. Yeah, so when you play F5, it's the Dutch, and then if you combine that with like this, so I don't know, now it's becoming more like a W or something. But that's the Stonewall, and it's called the Stonewall attack. It's pretty popular. White will play F4, E3. You guys may have seen that. Sometimes you can even put your bishop on G5 too, and then play F4. Get your bishop outside the pawn chain. It's a very common structure. Problem is his bishop. So he's given up. He's traded off his good, so-called good bishop. Now he's left with the bad bishop. That bishop is going to be stuck in there for a while. So and now it's actually you have more pawns on the color of your bishop. So these are some problems positionally. And as Fisher said, tactics flow from the superior position. So all these positional factors, that's kind of what positional chess is essentially, is it's a lot of small things that add up over time. Like one little thing on its own is probably not enough to decide the game. Well, that bishop is a serious issue, but still like all these things, you have weaknesses, you have a bad bishop, maybe your king's exposed, it all adds up. Okay, so E3. And meanwhile, Capablanca has no problems. Knight's developing, bishop's developing. Yeah, it looks a little funny, but he's going to the side. Yeah, I think he's trying to cover. Well, you notice actually the second he played F5, we talked about this in I think the first time when we did some games, like last month. So the second that black plays F5, he actually has a weakness. Do you guys see what the weak square is for tray ball here? Think about the square that he's essentially every pawn move is a commitment. So but when he played F5, he lost his ability to control a square in his own position, in his own side of the board.
E5?
Yep, that's right, Patrick. E5, you said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the dark square, well, essentially what he's done is he's clamped down on the light squares. Well, it's kind of funny one here because I usually go knight f6 and the knight comes in. So you can land a knight there and have it supported. So he's committed to the light squares, but at the same time, he's given up the dark squares, essentially. And that's what Capablanca is going to exploit. So like e5, you always have to kind of, I think of it like you're kind of babysitting that square. You just like have to always watch it. So knight, I mean, you don't want to come in yet, but when the time is ripe, the knight can hop in there. It's just something that his opponent always has to watch out for. Now, of course, if he has a chance, again, he'll break in the center and try to sort of get rid of the weak. It's always technically a weak square though, because there's no pawn that can attack it. So again, the second game in particular has a lot of that about weaknesses and occupying them, but there's a big part in this game too. Okay, so developing, connecting your rooks, fully developed. And there's that kind of W or M from his side. And again, just more pawns on his bishop. That's not what he wants. It's restraining his activity. It's not good. Okay, so Capablanca we call this a mysterious rook move. So it's like, okay, what exactly do you have in mind? It's actually part of his grander strategy. So one big part of it is restraining the bishop. What do you think is the second part of his strategy with his rook b1 kind of forecasting that? And the pawn structure might change a little bit.
You might want to attack later down on the b file after pushing the b pawn, and exploit the queen side.
Right, you can attack on the queen, yeah, and that's a big thing, is that you don't have to just attack the king. So a lot of positional chess is also, hey, look, if the factors favor me to attack on the queen side, on the left side, or depending on what side you're on, right, the side where the queen starts, then why not do it? Because it'll gain space. And actually, this side, he kind of in this game he plays both sides. Knight comes out. Well, now he has an opportunity. There it is. Knight comes in, challenges his knight, secures. So he's like, okay, you can take me, and I'd have to fill in the hole, but I would be gaining. Essentially, that's a hole right there. But I would be gaining more space. So it's not ideal. You'd rather have a knight there than a pawn, but still, the knight's going to do more damage than the pawn would. Okay, bishop finally develops. Supports it. So now he says, okay, now if you take me, I'm going to keep my knight. I'm going to take back my knight, keep it well outposted on e5. My son is messing around over here with some books. Let's see. So just let me know if you're getting distracted by him. He's just hanging out. Okay, knight to f3, rook to d8, b4. So there it is, starting to push the b pawn. Now he commits to c5 too before he plays b5. He ends up getting more of a clamp with c5. That's his space game. So right now, actually, Capablanca, well, even from here, he technically has a space advantage because, like, in terms of the pawns, the territory here is equal, right? The d pawn is met by the d pawn, the f pawn is met by the f pawn. But you notice the subtlest thing, the pawn being on c4, it gives him slightly more space. That matters, actually. That's the start of the Queen's Gambit. So when you play the Queen's Gambit, you have a tiny space advantage. And then, especially if you get to play c5, well, then you're really, I used to actually, when I started out playing d4, I would experiment a lot with pushing to c5 early on. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you definitely get your opponent in these kind of binds a lot, if you can, because of the space advantage, where they can't move much, which is this game is all about that bind. So b4 kind of starts that, gaining some more space with the pawns. Okay, bishop has nothing better to do, goes back. Rook comes over. So you can see he's clearly going for the queen side now, but he doesn't have to commit to just the queen side. So he's trying to slow him down with this break. He sees the break coming. It makes it harder to achieve with the bishop and the pawns controlling it. And be careful, because if you do it too soon, would you have to maybe trade off bishops? Like if you go here right away, I don't know, I mean, it's kind of hard not to trade bishops. Takes, and also opens up his rook. So it kind of gives him a lot of play that he doesn't need to get. And then if he takes, well, if you decide to take back, now you're trading off his awful bishop, which is not something you should really rush to do to help him out. Okay, so queen f2 swings. Now this isn't a deep move, because so he's showing, okay, I already have something set up on the queen side, but now I might get something going on the king side. If nothing else, it might just throw his opponent off a little bit. But I think really he wants his queen side attack to work. But by focusing on the king side, he might actually accentuate that attack. He might improve it. So and hey, if he can attack the king in the process, why not? But even if he doesn't, you'll see it's going to gain him more space too. So he keeps this. Now this is a nice move too. So your opponent is attacking your knight. Shows really deep understanding. He says, okay. Well, first of all, I think we talked about last time about you shouldn't trade pieces if you have more space. You guys remember that? I think we maybe discussed that. So you don't want to trade out the pieces too much because you want them to be more pent up since they have, you see, there's just not, if you counted the squares, you would just see there's not many squares for a trade ball to maneuver in. Capablanca definitely has a few more right now. Just does flexibility, right? To swing sideways and stuff, to lift up rooks and so forth. So after 97, now he wants to trade. So should you, I'll block the moves so you guys can guess. Would you want to trade knights or what would you do here? I mean, you're going to have a better bishop. You're still going to be left with in terms of imbalances. So we have space, right? We have space. We're going to have a better bishop. Our bishop's more active. It's good, but why not have a potentially better knight? And also, again, just keep him cramped. The more you trade, it's like if you have 10 people in a small room, okay, that's pretty uncomfortable. You get or in a chairlift or something, right? But if you only have like 2, okay, we can handle that. So you want to make it, you want to keep that burden on them. So what do you think? Where should we go?
Maybe A4, continuing the attack inside.
I mean, we could just continue our attack, but first he just takes a moment, he just drops his knight back. He essentially retreats. But he's like, all right, I already know I have a great position, and there's no way, see, he's restrained him. That's important too. Don't let him get in this break. Obviously, he's not going to play here because you have 2 pawns on there, he's going to take it. But he also has 2 pawns covering c5. Again, he's got that dark square control. So it's very hard for his opponent to place any pawns on dark square. But if he doesn't get a break in, he's contained. Does that make sense? You need a break. Well, this is a closed game. The center's locked up. When the center's locked, you have to get a break. Now, if the center pawns were liquidated, then you can break through the center, but we don't have that in this position. So we need to go for breaks. Actually, I did a session with my, I have an adult class that I teach on Saturdays, and I have a study on here with it's all about different pawn breaks. I can show you guys the link to that. Okay, so Rick goes here. And there he goes. Now he closes it up. So he finally gets his c5, and he kind of gave him the option to take. But if he had taken, the bishop would have just aimed at the king this way, right? And the weak pawn. So he never took. Now he just gains more space. And he can always go, and as Robert said, you can go a4 and b5 and break through later on. Okay, here comes the knight. There it is. Continues his attack. Now this is an interesting moment. So remember, we didn't trade knights. Now, what would you guys do? He went here. He just kind of doesn't know what to do. So it's a difficult position. So he's kind of messing around with the knight. But if the knight, there's no purpose to it though. But if the knight had come into this weak square, right, occupied, defended by 2 pawns, what do you think Capablanca is prepared to do? Think of imbalance. Remember imbalances. Either the imbalance is there or you actively create the imbalance.
Would he just trade? And
Just take it.
then after the takes and put the knight back on e5.
We'll say he takes usually you take toward the center for more central control. Then he comes back to e5. No need to go to g5, so just kick you out with h6. But that's our outpost.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you guys assess it now? Does it look good for white, for Capablanca?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, we call it, well, it's almost like, we call it an octopus if the knight reaches, when the knight's on the 6th rank, because that's just the monster, right? Attacking 6 different squares, 8, rather 8 tentacles, sometimes 6, sometimes attacking 6, but can technically go in 8 different directions. Now, if he goes into e5, I mean, it's still, it can still do a lot. It's just a very powerful piece. It can hop around it a little bit, but it's just really, it's making look at the knight compared to the bishop. So clearly, Capablanca would have won the minor piece battle by making that imbalance. So it's like, yeah, his bishop was better than his opponent's bishop, but that knight was still like, that knight would be pretty annoying on e4. So just rid yourself of the knight, and then you have the, I would call that the uncontested knight. There's nothing that can contest it unless he really wants to come over and take it with the rook, but then we win the exchange. That's good. We'll win the rook for the knight. So if he really wants to get rid of it, in the meantime, we can throw our pawns at him and attack him on either side of the board. But remember, this is a little hard to achieve. He's at least restraining our b5 break. But hey, we'll just say, okay, well, now we're going for g4 or something. You know, maybe swing our rook over and throw our h pawn and break through on the h file. So we have flexibility here, or possibly even g4 and f5, crack it open somehow. We're gonna pry open some lines. Okay, so he didn't go there, he went here, but it's important to know how you would react to that. So queen goes back, simply retreats calmly, covering here. Now remember, he's got a strategy where he's flexible. He does not really, see, it looked like he was showing his cards by saying, hey, I'm going all in on the queen side, but he hasn't committed to b5 yet. He can do that anytime he wants. In the meantime, you'll see he starts his king side action because his opponent's all bundled up on the queen side now, getting ready for a break there. So why not hit him when they're not ready? There's g4. I mean, there's really no way to stop it, right? You can easily prepare g4. So knight goes back, at least he covers this square, stops the knight from going to e5. Okay, there's your break, double break. Well, you have pawns, technically your pawns are aiming both ways. It's all about where your pawns are aiming. So I mean, mostly they're aiming, now they're aiming over here, but hey, they're going this way too. So you can also play with g5 or trading potentially. Okay, there's that awful bishop going to d7, just kind of sitting around, trying not to get in the way. Okay, rook goes to c. Now, flexible move. He can swing laterally. King h8. Okay, again, he's kind of spooking. I think he's just trying to kind of spook his opponent a little bit. It's like, he's not really, I mean, look, he's not going to checkmate him here. There's no checkmate ideas in sight. But you have options of maybe opening lines. We can double our rooks or something, which is kind of what he does. But now he closes it. Before, his opponent even has an option of cracking open the g file, maybe trying to trade pieces off. So now he contains him more. And you can really start to see the bind, right? You guys can sense the space advantage. This is a perfect example of pawns giving you space advantage. Now, yeah, again, if you count the squares that you can move to, but it's probably like 3 times as many squares that he has access to. If you can calculate it yourself if you want, but you can tell, you can just see intuitively that there's a lot more maneuverability here for Capablanca. Okay, now he starts pushing his h pawn. King to g7, h5. Now this is an interesting strategy. Sometimes you can do this, or sort of a tactic, but with h5. So yeah, he can take your h pawn, but there's also a positional idea behind it too, because right now he's trying to keep his pawns together. So if he takes, okay, can we get the pawn back pretty easily? I mean, there's nothing that can really defend it except for the king, right? So we can easily, you can do like queen h4 or rook h, even rook h2. Probably the queen will lead. And whatever he does, we're going to take it back. So the difference is h7 is our target now. So now we have a serious target. And if we win h7, we have a passed pawn, protected by a pawn, protected passed pawn. So it's just very, very uncomfortable. And we can infiltrate on the h file. So he doesn't want to give Capablanca that much. So he just tries to cover everything. Rook h2. Okay, trying to keep his rooks connected. Now there you go. Now he's swinging to the queen side. But you'll see they're both very closely linked. Okay, gets this king out of the way so he can double up. So now it looks like he's taking this pretty seriously. He's like, okay, I'm going to try and really scare you about something, you know, it's really a ghost threat, but you have to know whether it's a real threat or a ghost threat, right? But it's pretty much a ghost threat, but it's still something that at least spooks out his opponent enough to have him pull his pieces over to the king side. But remember, at first he was pulling him to the queen side. He was to the king side. Now that he's all clustered over here, he can actually break through on the other side of the board. But he's kind of playing with both. It's tricky though, because again, this b5 idea was very hard to achieve without trading bishops. I mean, worst comes to worst, we'll trade off the bishops. But why should we? That's the last thing we want to do, right? We want to get everything if we can. Okay, if we have to give away, if we have to trade them, fine. But we're going to try and get everything here. So now he goes queen a1, but he actually times this out because his opponent only has so many waiting moves. Then he goes to a3, comes back again. Okay, so now he gets his break in. Now it's actually tactically, so positional idea, queenside breakthrough, but it's tactically justified. So you want to mix here, you're kind of trying to blend the tactics and positional ideas. So b5 takes, check. So let's see if you guys can figure out the tactical idea behind this. So after check, king goes back. Now, obviously, like I said, he's not going to checkmate him right now. He's closed up all the lines, but he's so pent up, right? His pieces are really becoming more and more restricted. So when the king goes to f8, it's just I think it's a masterpiece. So when the king goes to f8, and you take, okay, now the question is, can trade ball trade bishops off by taking back? What would happen if you tried to do that?
If black took the pawn, then white could just do like AA check.
We have the back rank infiltration on the A file. That's really what's coming down to is the A file, and he's gonna get access to it. The key is that he wants to be the one, speaking of controlling open lines, he wants to be the one getting the A file first. Now you do have a check. Well, let's look at that concretely. If you were to do the check, does it actually achieve anything? Where's the king go?
Not really.
Now he just goes king e7. That's what he's hoping for, just to run back here, go to pretty snug on e7, because normally we wouldn't want our king in the center, but the rules are a little different in locked up positions where they can't access your king. Similar to in terms of development. When the position's locked up, it's not about how many pieces you have out necessarily. It's more about, are they deployed in the most effective way to exploit the situation in front of you, right? Whereas an open game, it's like, okay, the pieces are just flying at each other, and if you have your pieces back, like your knight on b1 and your rook on a1 and stuff, okay, you're gonna get clobbered, right? Okay, so takes back, king e7. But this is about as close as it gets, right? The only action going on now is over here. But again, it's linked. It's linked to his king. So first of all, he's pent up. This restricts his opponent more. Also, this is a target. So if we can somehow break through, we can actually win. If we can win this pawn or some of these pawns, even one of them, that's enough to win easily with the passed h pawn. So this becomes a fixed target if we can ever get there. That's just something, it's just more things to work with. Our target is only e3. I don't think our opponent's going to get to e3. Just keep an eye on that. But just in terms of defense, but that's about it. And really the key is the open line. Who's going to control that? Because you don't want your opponent, that's the infiltration point. That's all it's coming down. But if Capablanca had to really clearly evaluate that and to know that he had enough on just the A file, which of course he did. He had to look at that carefully because that's really the decisive factor. Now, when you take, so the question is, what happens if he takes this way? Because that's the thing we were talking about. It's kind of annoying because even if you could come back and take it, it's like, well, I don't really want to take and trade off the my great bishop for your, this is the bane of his existence. So why would you trade it off? Well, what do you guys see the trick?
Yeah, c6.
Okay,
Yeah, I saw that too.
You see it now? Andre, you see it too? It's c6 idea? Because you've lured the king, there was nothing you can do. It didn't look obvious earlier. Probably figured if anything, he's going to open the file. But the idea is to lure the king into f8. So he's on the same diagonal as the queen. That was the deep idea behind that little timing behind a3. So all that stuff that he did was essentially to get his finally to find the best time to get his b5 break in. And then once he does it, he goes to b6. But look what he has to do. Actually, it's interesting. The rook, he can't even challenge it. It looks like, oh, you attack me, I attack you. Why does that? Tactically, that fails. Why is that? We got to always be looking at that and saying, wait, what if my opponent does this? What if they do that? Remember from last time. Always think about, even when you're attacking, think about defense, because you don't want to spoil it. You don't want to mess up your attack. So rook a8, what happens?
You just gain a rook because
his queen is just hanging.
Yeah.
Your queen's hanging, but you have the first move. So you simply grab the rook and then when you take, if he doesn't take back, fine. If he does, then you just run away. If he does take, you just win the queen. So when you take the queen back, but now you've netted a rook. So queen for queen, free rook. Okay, so b6, queen back. Now so that means that it's just beautiful the way he plotted this whole thing out. So now he finally, there we go. It's called V. Chessgames.com calls it V for victory. So finally he completes this awesome V, like a school of birds or something, right? And the queen goes back, and then there you go. Now he's clinching the A file. Only he's going to get the A file. And can you guys imagine what the infiltration point is going to be? Because I mean, you can't really get to A8. In some lines you might, but he's got 3 pieces covering A8. But where do you guys think the infiltration point is for Capablanca? It all comes down to this. The only square you can really reach. You don't have to do it right away, but it's something you're going to coordinate to get to. Think about the only squares you can really safely go to. It's pretty limited. at this point. Or think of it like this. What's your target? We talked about 8. Actually, this becomes relevant. That's why maybe this one too. This one's guarded easily by the bishop for now and the king. This actually does become relevant in some lines later on. But where's your immediate target right here? The first target you can really get to. You'll do a few maneuvers.
B7's.
Right, you guys see the B7 because you only have the A file. Now he's going to do some maneuvers. He's going to get to it. But where would you infiltrate? It doesn't have to be with your queen. It can be with a rook. What's the classic place for the rook to go? Where, generally speaking, where does your rook want to land in your opponent's position?
The 7th rank.
7th rank, or yeah, 7th from your perspective anyway, right? So, or from white 7, or in old school, the old school notation would be, rook to rook 7, regardless of which side you're on. For black, if black comes in, it's also rook 7 for black. So because they didn't used to have the algebraic with the letters and numbers, but basically 7th rank or 2nd rank. Yeah. So those are the infiltration points. Now, the rook comes over, and the thing is, all he can do is just shuffle. It's got nothing to do. He moves. He just scoots the queen out of the way. There it goes. Rook invades on a7. So she can. The rook can just sit there, guarded by the b pawn. So we've completed this really nice, I guess, or more like B is for victory for vice, right? Create a really nice vice on your opponent, essentially, with your pawns. And now at the end of that, you got your rook anchored in there. Okay, just bring the rook back, double him up, and he just to complete the picture, let's triple him up. They call this Alekhein's gun. I'm not sure who. Historically, you'd have to look at it to see who did it first. I have a feeling Capablanca did it before Alekhine, so maybe it's more accurately Capablanca's gun or cannon or something. But you have 2 rooks in front of the queen. That's always good. So the queen doesn't usually want to lead unless it's a checkmate, because the rooks, since they're weaker pieces, so they can trade off possibly first, and the queen will usually finish it off. So the queen gets behind. There's tons of power on the A file, powering through. Okay, now he kind of figures it out. They might have been around the time control or something. Like you can get to the next time control. They shuffled a little bit here, kind of figure, okay, where's the best place for my king? Now it's very interesting. Again, in terms of prophylaxis, as I say, Capablanca or Nimzovich or Karpov were really big on prophylaxis. Just essentially take away all your opponent's options, right? Like a vaccine or something, right? Just a little bit of safety. Make sure you don't get sick or something, right? So when the king goes to f8, then you go to g2. So he figured out, okay, what are the only possibilities my opponent has to get some kind of counterattack? Obviously, these pieces aren't doing anything. Maybe his knight tries to take on g5. So let's say you want to wander somewhere with your knight. If you move away somewhere, then he can take here. Especially if you're in this line, you can take it for free. But in some cases, it takes back, and the queen might be able to infiltrate. So if he actually ended up over here, if he ended up over here where he was on, went the wrong way. If he's on h4, then in certain lines, there's actually some tricks where the knight can take, and if the king takes, if the queen's able to reach d8, he can get checkmate. He's like, okay, that's probably not realistic, like practically going to happen, but at least he wants to watch out for little counter tricks. And also, if the knight were to take, and if you take back with the pawn, the queen will be able to checkmate. That's more feasible. So let's say the knight moved away, he ends up going here. So he's going to watch out for this type of trick. So he figured, okay, look, if I'm on g2, anything you do with this diagonal opening, there's nowhere for your. Okay, I'm not in the pin. There's nowhere for your queen to go. So it's just like one last measure he took before carrying out his final assault, basically. You just have to, just kind of, again, going back to Samuel's idea, just look both ways, right, before you cross the road. So even when you think you're about, that's actually psychologically the most common time to make a mistake is when you think you're doing better. Because then you let your guard down. You say, okay, I got him. Let me just finish him off. Well, you still have to be patient. Usually it's best just to take a couple measures. And that way, well, that actually came up a lot in my games against William, because last week, as Will was putting a lot of pressure on me. Like I had extra material, but he was putting a lot of pressure on me. So if I just went through and tried to break in to his position, he would have had some awful counterattack that I didn't expect. So I just had to try to restrain him, because he's definitely a great attacker. So yeah, he just says, okay, no options for you now. So all you can do is wait. but he still has to complete this attack. Like it's picturesque, right? You got this beautiful picture, but you have to finish him off. So what's the final plan that you think with the knight maneuver? He starts maneuvering his knight. What do you think he has in mind with that? We already know what the target is, which is what?
B7.
Okay, so where's he maneuvering to? Because again, you
Knight.
can put your pieces wherever you want, basically. You have all the time in the world here.
Yeah, knight to B3 and then knight to A5.
Okay, and then we have two attackers. We have two attackers, one defender. Now he can either go rook D7 or maybe do that in conjunction with knight to D8, covering B7. So it looks like he has a defense on that. Well, somehow, I don't know, somehow maybe he didn't defend it the best way. We tried, he went here instead. He probably should have gone the other way. It'd be interesting to see how he wins that way, but he tried this way to bring the knight to D8. But there's a little bit of a vulnerability. You guys, so look at it, just be like a hawk. You're kind of like bird's eye view. I'm seeing two vulnerabilities, but one in particular right now. What's the vulnerability in Treyball's position right now? In terms of tactical points, tactics, loose pieces, undefended king.
The king side looks pretty empty.
Yeah, it's empty. Well, if we could, yeah, we definitely want to get through laterally. We're trying to break through here because if we can get in, that's again that H pawn is really relevant now. Because if we win this, it's pretty much we can start attacking the king. Plus, we have two threats: the checkmate idea and the queening idea. So if we get that H pawn, it's just done. But before we get there, well, the B pawn's the target, as we said. And where else is it? There's an immediate vulnerability that this is kind of the way he coordinates. He's probably in time pressure right now too, which kind of expounds his problems. But after knight to D8, then what are our options? What are where there's another weakness that we can exploit?
Well, I see that nothing's defending the bishop as well, but
yeah, that's a tactical. Well, the king has some issues, and tactically also the bishop is undefended, so we can exploit that somehow because we have the lateral pressure against. So technically, we're looking right at the bishop, just have a little bit of a barrier. So do you guys see the nice move that he made right here?
did he
I don't know if I showed you guys or not.
bishop A6, bishop A6,
bishop A6, boom. It's kind of interesting. He's just completely in line because that's the only point of infiltration. But again, he had to be careful. You know, he had to double check this and triple check it to make sure that this would work. Because if this whole plan doesn't work, then it would be kind of silly because he creates this awesome plan and his opponent just clogs it up and it's just a fortress, essentially fortress defense, and you can't infiltrate. But he saw that he had, I don't know, I'm curious actually. I have to look at the we can check that out later, maybe the rook D7. I'm sure there was still a way to get through, but that seems like it would have been a little bit trickier. Who knows? Maybe he had some breakthrough idea of like bishop coming this way or something. Who knows? But I'm sure he had it planned out. So after here, knight goes to D8, bishop A6. So now the idea is that you're overwhelming the point here, the weak point. And the nice thing is that because of your space, that's a perfect demonstration of that. You're anchoring in the rook and you're restricting his rook. Remember we talked about restraint last week, restraining your opponent. So they can't even move the rook once, one square. Oh, wait a second. Well, technically, okay, fine. They take this and then you take the knight if they take your rook. But it's just very restricted. And so we have 3 attackers and you can only get 2 defenders on it. So and that's why it would be nice if he had some kind of lateral defense. But I think really it's just a symptom of his clogged up position because of his lack of space. So the space is nice for your maneuverability and bad for their maneuverability. So it works out. Okay, bishop A6. So overwhelming, then he has to pretty much take it or lose the B pawn. That's very important because once you get the B pawn, you have the pass pawn, plus you have the lateral attack that'll break through. So he takes it. But you notice also when he takes, we have a target here and another target here, and we have a protected pass pawn to push. So it's just winning basically structurally. Because and it really came down to the queenside breakthrough. But look, he still has a kingside attack too. So it's actually all of his prior preparations on the queen side and the king side are paying off. They're paying dividends now, right? So he's got his attack here, he's got his attack over here. Guys, so it takes on D7, covers. Okay, so now again, as Fisher said, tactics flow from his superior position. So clearly he's developed a much better position now. All those positional advantages added up. He's just better pieces, better pawns. He's broken through, and the king is a little loose. So how do you finish this now? Now we're just okay. Now it's a puzzle, just a pure puzzle. But again, chess is a lot more than just a puzzle because we had to do all that preparation to get there, and then we get to solve our puzzle to finish the game. So what kind of, you should be, again, looking at your forcing moves, right? Checks, captures. Or capture checks, and then regular checks, and then captures. What do you have?
There's a rook takes e7.
There's a capture.
Candidate move.
You said it's not a good move?
A candidate move.
A candidate move, yeah. That's one option. What else?
You can also check as another option.
Right, you have one check available, capture check.
Right.
So we should definitely look at that too. So it takes, those are the two main options, looks like. You could take the pawn, but that looks like it's pretty well guarded. I guess you can, and then a threat would be like push the pawn. So we have all those options. It looks like that's about it. So we're looking at taking this or this, capture check, or regular capture, another capture, and a push. So I would break each one of those down, look at the most, and start, again, if you look at the most forcing first, that's most likely to be correct when you have a tactical scenario. So which one are we looking at? What's the most forcing?
Is it the check?
Yeah, with the check is most forcing. It has to respond to that. Taking here, we can look at that too. I think takes, king takes back. Seems like he's covered for now.
Oh,
If you take
yeah.
this one, do you guys see it now? The rook has to move away.
Yeah.
And then what happens, Robert?
And then you take the pawn with the knight, and you have a triple fork.
Triple, right. So when the rook has been deflected to d8, at the same time you remove the defender. So essentially, you're not really winning pieces, but you're just picking up another pawn. But that's all. I mean, this because of the pawn structure, it's just overwhelming. He resigned right after that because he takes. He gets the fourth.
So brutal.
I think he resigned at this move. Let's see. No, right there, he resigned. Yeah, but that's all it takes because, well, now he's actually cleaning up two pawns. But the more important thing is that he's infiltrating. There's the final infiltration, right? It all started here. Bishop a6 uncorks it. And then now, yeah, that's over if you take this one. Then we'd have two, then both of the end pawns of our like pawn chains, they would both become protected. And remember, that's important if it's protected. Anchored in, right? If you have a protected pass pawn, it just has more strength. Because it can't be, you can push it when you want. You can just leave it there. It's actually good for king and pawn endgames too, because it's always this asset that you have just sitting there. And the king can only, it'll just tie up your opponent's king while you do whatever you want. So they're good for king and pawn endgames or really any endgame. It's just not usually a winning asset. Okay, so take, fork, and then he resigned. But if the queen moves, yeah, once you take the rook, probably the back rank rook to be able to come in with your rook down there and try to win the queen. And yeah, there's just nothing really to do. I mean, I don't know. I might even trade queens. I think checks. I mean, you could literally just trade queens and it's just over immediately because now there's nothing to do about this. Once you got two pawns, there's a chess theory that if you have two pawns on the 6th rank against a rook, there's nothing else around. It just can't stop it. So if you know you can achieve this on the next move, it's over. The king can't get there in time. And also if whatever else they try, how would you guys finish this most effectively? Just in case, if it happened to go on for a little bit.
Trade off the rooks.
What's that?
Trade off the rooks.
Exactly. You trade the rook, and when you trade the rook, they have to take it, or else you win the free rook. But of course, when they take it, you're getting the queen. The king is too far stranded. So it's a nice game, right? It's just a different kind of game. It's not going to happen every day, But if you get a game like this once in your career, in your whole chess career, that would be pretty cool. But it's just But the thing is, like, so when I'm playing my games, I think of games like this if something similar comes up. So you want to have model games in your mind, of the greats. And it's not going to manifest itself in exactly the same way, but at least you kind of take aspects of a Capablanca game or a Kasparov game or a Polgar game or some famous player or whoever, or your own game, and just have that adds. But essentially, that adds to your experience by having all these games in your mind. I don't know, you don't have to memorize them all, but you're picking up patterns. So the ideas of, and remember, a lot of this game. Well, what do you guys think? Like, what are essentially the things that he did to beat his opponent this game? Some of the main themes that he used.
It was the bad bishop all along.
Yeah, that bad bishop at the very end, the bishop finally he got to trade it off. But by then it was like, okay, fine, I'll give you my bishop for your bishop, but I get to infiltrate with my rook, which matters more. But that bishop was just pent up the whole game, kind of stewing in his own juices. So that's not fun. What else?
Structure.
Yeah, pawn structure was
Smothering the opponent.
What's that?
Smothering the opponent so that they can't do anything.
Yeah, it gives you all the maneuverability that you need, all the freedom to move your pieces. At the same time, it restricts your opponent. So it's, yeah, for every time you push it, I guess in this case, it's kind of a zero-sum game. So every time you gain something, your opponent's losing something there, similar to material. Yeah, and the idea of the breakthrough, the way that he was very patient. He didn't just go for b5. You knew he wanted b5, but he said, okay, I don't want to get it in just yet. I want the best version of it. So he was very patient. First, he plays, he starts with the queen side, shifts over to the king side, makes him worry about things there, and then ultimately that breakthrough, well, not even breakthrough, just the check with h6. It squeezed his opponent more, but it also, because the king had to go to f8, it enabled the breakthrough on b5 to work. So if nothing else, it was just to make b5 work, but it had the added benefit of like tying him down more. So h7 was a relevant target in certain lines. Ties the king down to the king side more. So he can't be everywhere at once. And again, he's just got that maneuverability. So he can quickly shift just shuttle his pieces from side to side and make this perfect breakthrough with just enough resources to make it work. And again, that final restriction, just restrain him from doing anything, found the best place for his king before the final breakthrough with knight a5 and bishop a6. So yeah, a lot of it really instructive things in that game that you can use. So that is, I think it's from here. Yeah, Carlsbad with the K. I think it's in Germany or something. What is that? I'm not sure. Or maybe it was, I guess CSR. Maybe that's the country. Maybe it was like a part of former Yugoslavia or something. I don't know. I have to look it up. So this was in 1929. And that's, yeah, so just if you look up Capital, if you look at chessgames.com, it has his best games, and that's like one of his top 10 that they have there, I think. Okay, so then there's one, well, we can look into openings. Do you guys want to jump into the openings now? Or there's one other one that we can look at, which is it's about similar ideas about weak squares and stuff. So I think this one gets the points across though, in terms of fighting for weak squares and also containing your opponent. That's a big part of it, restricting them. So you guys want to jump into the openings?
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be good.
That's fine with me. In fact, it's actually very ironic. I looked into this Slav defense, like I think, like late last week. I think it was. I forget which day it was, but it was something else. Like I was watching a ton of videos on it, seeing, because I don't really have much. I don't have many opening ideas as black for Queen's Gambit or the London system.
Yeah, against the London system.
I kept playing so many Londons.
I know it's become super trendy, so I try to avoid trendy lines. So although I don't mind the London at all. Well, usually you go c5, a quick c5 and queen b6 to hit their weak b2 pawn. You ever do that? Did you look at those lines? That seems to be good treatment of the London system, because they always have, whenever they bring their bishop out, they're weakening because they say knights before bishops. So when you bring your bishop out so early, you have an issue of that weak b2 pawn. Sometimes they'll just let you take it, but if you take b2, then c3 falls and stuff. So I could show you on the board real quick, but like that might be a good example. So how do you play?
Is that like a Benoni kind of like?
Can you play c5?
But no, is that like a Benoni? Since I know what the Benoni is.
You mean the thing that I'm talking about against
right? Because you said c5.
No, it's with d5 though. With d5.
Oh, d5.
You could do that other one. Yeah, you could do a quick. Yeah, you could do without d5 as well. It could be more like a Benoni or something. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can play against it. But the key is that when you get c5 in, it lets you go queen b6, which seems to be the thing that annoys people when they play the London. Well, there's certain lines. I'll show you some lines there. But yeah, that might be a good way to start. What other openings did you guys want to look at? Anything else in particular?
Maybe like the English Open or English opening.
Handling from the white side or the black side? Just understanding it. understanding the opening in general.
Yeah, just understanding it.
Yeah, I actually know the opening really well. I played that a lot. So yeah, we can look into that. And then Andres, are there any openings in particular you want to look at?
Not that I can think of.
Let's start with those then. We can look at how to handle. So we'll look at, okay, if they play, and you guys have probably, when I play it out, you'll probably recognize it. It's just an easy way to play. You know, you get your pawn on d4, you get your bishop on f4. It's definitely, there's nothing really wrong with it. But the question is whether you, when you play d4, you can actually play c. You play like a queen's gambit too. You can play a queen's gambit with bishop f4, but a lot of people like to just play more kind of modestly, like d4 and c3 and e3. So, you know, it's actually similar to what Capablanca did. But the whole C3 is very slow, though. It is very slow, and they're hoping to kind of contain you, but you have to break out of that and put some real pressure. So, but here's what you do. So, you can buy a book on it or watch videos, but really the quickest way to learn about an opening is you just say, okay, how do the best players play it? That's really nice because you know they've done their homework, obviously. So, okay, so you guys see this screen on chess.com, and do you have access to it? Have you guys ever used this cap? If you go to Explore, have you ever done that?
Yeah.
That's the best for opening. Yeah, you don't really need to go to, I think this gives you like an overview of openings, but if you want to actually look up specific lines, just go to the cap and go to Explorer. So how familiar are you guys with, who's used this before, this function?
I've definitely used the open. I've used the openings and the explorer a few times.
Okay, and you could do that when you're doing an analysis board, like in live chess. You can look at the game you just played, press analysis, and then in the top right, it'll have a thing like openings or something, or book, or like on Lee Chess, they have a thing where, you know, you can make a study or just looking at, I just did analysis board and I imported the PGN. So you see down there, it says PGN. That was from the chess, because I went on chessgames.com. I copied the PGN, pasted it here, import, pressed import, and then that's how I got this. And then also, yeah, if you go toward the top, it'll just automatically say, okay, are there any games like this? And you're starting to see, okay, these are games that, until it leaves the book, essentially, when no one's playing it, except for that one game. So you see like, okay, there's been 99 games with E3, 36 games. Well, that's not a comprehensive database, but I don't think so, but it'll give you, you know, pretty good idea. I guess taken from like the weekend chess and stuff, different data, or chess base, pulled from different databases maybe, to give you pretty good idea of how players handle that. Yeah, I mean, you can get some expensive thing, but they have a lot of just free stuff online that you don't really need to pay for. And if you're a really serious tournament player, you know, getting up to like master level, maybe you can buy it, but I don't really use that. I just use online resources. Okay. So, but just the key is you understand your systems. And I think a great way to do it is just say, okay, how do masters play this? So let's flip it around. We'll look at it against the London. So D4, or again, yeah, I mean, what you were looking at, Robert, you were saying you're playing a Slav potentially against
Queen's Gambit. I play
against that
Slav.
Yeah, and Queen's Gambit is probably the most, yeah, it's like the tried and true way to handle D4, D5 is, and even if they go knight F6, white should probably, you know, the thing that grandmasters tend to play is C4. If you can't, so you can't get an immediate E4 in without dropping the pawns. You say, okay, the best thing I can get, second closest I can get to that is D4 and C4. Try and take the lion's share of the center, and then black is going to either say, okay, go ahead and take the center and I'll strike back, or more like kind of conservative old school ways like D4, D5, C4, you just go like E6. Queen's Gambit declined. Very, you know, kind of dry, just saying like, you know, kind of, again, the traditional way is just saying, okay, you had the first move with white, I just want to equalize the game, take away any attack you have, and then then I'll fight for advantage maybe after that, or just get a draw. But more adventurous ways to play are, yeah, you can accept it, or you can play a Slav, or you just don't play D5 and you play like knight F6, and now you're in the Indian defenses. Like, have you guys heard of, like, you see it says Indian game with knight F6? You got King's Indian, Queen's Indian. King's Indian is this one. Queen's is the queen fianchetto, the Queen's bishop. So as the queen, usually do that, and I like the Nimzo Indian a lot too, where you go C4, E6, and it's all about restraint. So again, when you go here, so you're still stopping them from going E4 without needing to get the traditional pawn center yet. So you can either occupy the center directly, or you try and kind of smash their center, trying to make them defend their center and try and, you know, break it up. So this is nice because you're just developing really quickly. and you're pinning the knight. Now this is Nimzo Indian and Queen, just to give you a quick overview. And then Queen's Indian is if they don't let you do that, you can check them. Bogo Indian, you check them. Just give, yeah, there's a lot of different lines. Or you can go B6 first. And now you've got the Queen's Indian coming with Queen's Indian defense defined by B6. And you got bishop B7. And if they ever go knight C3, you can pin that. But the point is they're like, I don't want that pin. So that's why they go knight F3. But this is not, yeah, this is fine for black. Okay, so, but if you were playing, so you're playing D5 then, Robert, if you're gonna play Slav. Now when they go C4. So now there's two ways. So now the London is immediate bishop F4, right? So you wanna look at that, or you wanna look at Queen's Gambit?
I play more, I've been playing a lot more, or against
London.
this times more frequently. So
Yeah, everyone's playing the London. Well, Magnus Carlsen got into it, and people say, "Oh, well, if Magnus did it, it must be good." So, but of course, he can outplay people. But he can outplay people from essentially even positions or minuscule advantages. So bishop F4. Now I like to go C5. So that's the most. Well, you can, and now take it with a grain of salt. But so here's how I start. I start with the big picture. Look at the statistics, but pretty quickly on, I want to look at the master games. And that's where actually 365chess.com is great for that, because it'll say, okay, when you're like 5 moves deep, it'll say, okay, Tiviakov has played this dragon position 70 times. Say, okay, Tiviakov really knew the dragon well, so I'm going to use him as the model in that. I'm going to model off his games. So after bishop F4, I think, and you can see, let me see if it even lets us go to master games. If you go down, no, wait, this video is in the way, hold on. Yeah, you can see how you can view, whenever you want, you can say view all games and we can start filtering. But we'll get a little bit deeper than that. So we'll look at the statistics first. Say, okay, what's the one that scores the best for black? Now we want to have a pretty good sample size. There's a little science here. Because we want to have a good sample size, right? We're using our statistics. So which one do you think scores the best?
C5.
Probably,
Yeah,
C5.
well, exactly, because bishop G4, it actually has a higher percentage. We might look at that, but it's kind of a weird looking move. And also it's only been played 35 times. So it's like an interesting kind of offbeat move that actually happened to work pretty well. But actually, look, I mean, it got 40%, but it's just that there are fewer draws. Whereas in this case, there are more draws. And then, and then the ones that aren't draws, white's taking those wins against bishop G4. Yeah, bishop G4 is probably not that great. It just doesn't seem to, maybe after knight F3. But C5 is okay. It's the second most popular move, but it clearly scores better than the immediate knight. Again, it might transpose later, but that seems to be the move, and I like it too. So look at C5, and this is how a lot of masters have handled it. Now they usually go C3 or E3, but you can see C3 actually scores pretty badly. Look at that for white, 14% wins. What are they all playing? Pretty much they play E3 then, right? That's the main move. But if they don't know what they're doing and they play, it looks like this is a bad move, or at least less accurate. So it's probably good to look at that and know how to handle that. But which one do you want to look at, Robert? And then we'll look at the master games from there. So E3 or C3?
E3.
Yeah, that's the main one. And you're seeing that. Do you ever probably see C3 sometimes? But usually I see this. I think they know what they're, if they have an idea what they're doing. And the idea is they should hold this, because you're playing like a Queen's Gambit reverse now. Say, okay, if you're not going to play C4, I'm going to play C5. And if you don't do anything, I'm going to crumble your center. I'm going to take your center pawn, and then I'm going to have 2 pawns in the middle. You're only going to have 1, and I took the center first with my D pawn. So white should try to stake out the center a bit with one of the pawns securing it. And now, okay, let's look at the master games. It looks like we want to get knight F6 and knight C6, and then queen B6. But so let's say view all games from current position, because they're not too many. Working with a few thousand here, and then I would filter by black. So we're getting 35% black win, 33% white win, and only about a third draws. So, but it's looking pretty good, slightly better for black. But yeah, I would still say, take it with a grain of salt. I'd say approximately even based on that. And it also depends too, like let's say the theory developed over time. So you might have like a lot of losses for one side like 50 years ago. And then as the theory develops, they're like, oh, now I figured it out. So you have to be careful with that, with the statistics, because it depends on the year and stuff and how strong the players are. So, or like you start looking at something and like, okay, everyone who won with black here was like 200 points higher rated. So you look into the data a little more. The point, so at least we have a good sample size now. So we'll look at rating black, since we want to look at how to win with black. Or you can look at rating white and see the highest rated person with white that lost. And say, okay, if you could beat, like I look at a Bobby Fischer game sometimes, say, okay, if Fischer lost in this opening, whatever line, whoever beat him probably knew what they were doing. especially I found one line where someone beat him twice in the same line. So I said, okay, to my student, I said, okay, you should probably use this line. And it was some line against the Sicilian. Let's see. I'm seeing some wins for white. Well, this is rating black. So there's Magnus Carlsen. So he's winning with it. So I have to go beyond Magnus Carlsen. And we got Hikaru Nakamura winning with it. So some pretty high level encounters, 2700s, 2800. Yeah, they're not doing too well at the top level with black. But here, this is a good example. So this is a 75 move game. We got Ponamaria versus Gelfin. I think it's like Spain and Israel or something. And let's see, some draws. Let's go down a little more. There's Gelfin. Wait, Gelfin's losing. Oh, Gelfin is winning with black, and then he's losing with white. That was 38. That might be a good one to look at. So 2 grandmasters. And then another thing you can do is, again, you can see rating if there's more differential between, if you say like a 2800 versus a 2500, like just see them completely plow them in it. But I think it's more realistic though, if you see that they're both the same rating, say, okay, if you beat them at the same rating in not that many moves, you probably did pretty well with that. So let's take a look at that game. Click on that. So that'll get, but I like 365chess.com, so it'll just give you a list of the players who play it most frequently, that particular opening, and essentially you're finding an expert in that opening, and you can just study them and see how they play. Now, yeah, and this is the one without really. Sometimes they'll give you like on chessgames.com you'd have with annotations, but here it's just there's not really going to be any description. It's just you're just going to get a sense. You just kind of flip through and get a sense for how you handle it. So we'll look at it from black. Okay, so Inarkiev plays c5 this was against Gelfand, right? Yeah, and Gelfand's very strong. I mean, he was like top 10 in the world. So if he lost to it, it's probably pretty good handling of it by black. So he goes knight c6, e6. Interesting. So e6, playing pretty solidly there. c3, bishop d6. Oh, he wants to trade off the bishop. That's pretty common. You'll see that a lot. The bishop will retreat, say, okay, if you want to take me, I'm taking back and opening up my rook. So the knight comes out. Knight comes out. So he's not going for that early queen b6 stuff, not yet. Just castle. He's playing real solidly against it. It's probably transposing into a different kind of system. It's almost like the color. It's almost like white is playing a Slav defense, reversed. Because usually the Slav would be black has the pawn on c6. So now black has a little more space because he has. Remember we talked about you moved it twice. Your c pawn. They only moved it once. So black has a little more space, a little more comfortable. Moves away. Interesting. Let's see how he handles this. I would want to look at a couple more. Oh, he does do this. He does get queen b6 in. Now, often you will see queen b3 against it. But here, rook b1 kind of has to react to him. Okay, this is interesting. Really interesting way to treat it. Because he's shifting his knights over to the king side. Obviously, white can't castle queen side anymore, so he's going to have to be over here. He's going to try to attack. Well, now he's got the bishop pair. But he's playing for this, probably getting a knight into here. Huh. Kind of weird way that he played it, this Gelfand in this game. But he's going knight e5. So he's trying to anchor the knight in. Maybe you can go f4 like in that Stonewall setup. Oh, queen f3, okay. Well, that's a nice move. So what's the idea of bishop a6? Well, first of all, you don't have the bad bishop. Your bishop's clearly seeing activity. And what is it? What's the direct purpose of that move?
It prevents king from castling king
He's
side.
He's not castling. Yeah. Yeah, I think Gelfand just kind of, I don't know, he wasn't having a good day there. He's played in Russia in 2016. So he just wasn't having a good day, I guess. Usually you see some really nice games by him. But yeah, it didn't work out well out of the opening. So he's going for an attack. He's experimenting with this. Trading off the knight. But in this case, it's going to be the good bishop versus the not so good knight. In the other game, Capablanca would have had an awesome knight if he had traded off the bishop for the knight. But here it's the bishop that wins the day. That's just such a strong diagonal. And he can play for e5. He can crack open the lines in the center too. So he's keeping it closed. Interesting. So he's going. Now he's got lateral defense. So he's got to deal with a couple of immediate threats, but you can't do too much with just these two pieces because you can easily defend things. He's covering laterally. Oh, that's a nice move. So now he's covering. So he's hitting the rook while defending the diagonal. If you ever want to take, the queen will just kind of fianchetto, like a bishop. The queen will cover the king. So it seems like he's fine. It's kind of assessed that he can deal with the damage. Oh, that's interesting. So now you can't come in with h7. You can go to h6, but he also has rook h8 ideas. So he does do this. King just kind of escapes, and then he challenges the rook. So he's giving up the queen for he has to, because it's a skewer through the queen. It's not super bad. It's not really bad for him. He's giving up queen for 2 rooks. Technically, it's 10 points for white. But really, the problem is strategically, though. Strategically, who's doing better? So technically, he's up a point for a Gelfand. But who's better strategically? If he doesn't, assuming he doesn't lose his queen or something. But he can't even check here because bishop's covering stuff. What do you guys think?
I like black's position more. I think, well, I just prefer having a queen to the 2 rooks.
I mean, sometimes the 2 rooks, it really depends. Because sometimes the 2 rooks, if they can infiltrate. But look at this rook right here.
Yeah, it's not doing anything.
It's inactive. Yeah, the pieces are inactive. That's the problem. He's not going to win with just a rook out. And the main thing is that the bishop is infiltrated, and it's restricting white. It's actually creating a mating net too. So if we could somehow maneuver our queen, and we can checkmate in here or win the G pawn and stuff. So yeah, it's just looking bad. Let's see how we quickly just get a sense of. He clearly did well out of the opening. We'll just get a sense how he tries to infiltrate. Oh, he's breaking through the center, enhancing his king position, anchoring his bishop in. Interesting. So they break through the center. Looks like that pawn's going to fall. Yeah, he's in. He's infiltrating. And he's actually got 3 against 2. He's got 3 against 2 now. So he's said, hey, I'll make a pass pawn now. And just squeezing him with that. Oh, he felt obliged
I don't care about cases.
to give up the
I'm only concerned with that.
to give up the rook for the bishop. I guess if he had gone back, yeah, he's going to get steamrolled by those pawns. Well, actually, no, he's just going to take it. His queen could even take this pawn. It's just looking really bad. Now he's got, technically that's just a winning position. So we have technically 8 for 9 plus the extra. So 2 points up for black, but overwhelming advantage there with the queen and the 2 pawns.
True. If you have cases go up, it's right.
I'm hearing some, I got some background roommates or something. Background. Okay, so that was that game. Now I'll go back. That gives you a sense, though, right? It gives you a sense, but he handled it in not the most like aggressive way. I'll look around a little more. Let's see. We have a Alaska game. Oh, here we go. Now Caruana definitely knows how to handle it. And you have he's like 26-17 versus Fabiano. Have you guys heard Fabiano Caruana? He was with he's originally from Brooklyn, I think, like Fisher. And he ended up going to Italy for some time. It was like Italian champion, and then he came back to came back to the U.S. And now he is. Oh, I like Rublev. Okay, this is here you go. This is perfect. So you got an example of like a high, super grandmasters, pretty evenly matched, and it took him a while. It's very subtle. But you also want to know, okay, how do I crush someone in this opening? Well, there's a great example. Oh wow, even Carlson lost in this game. That's interesting too. But look at this; they both lost in 23 moves. So, but I think, here's Rublevsky beating a much weaker player. I mean, still a strong master, 2370, but he's at almost 2700. I actually like Rublevsky a lot. So here's I've learned the Queen's Gambit accepted from him. I used to play that a lot. So yeah, he definitely knows his openings. I think he's a Russian player. So d4, d5, bishop f4, c5. Probably some Russian tournament. Okay. So c5, e3, knight c6, c3, knight f6. So that's pretty much what you want to do. d5, c5, get your 2 knights out, and then probably queen b6. Let's see if he does it. He trades, actually. Trades first. Have a little bit of an imbalance because we have, so we've gotten rid of the c pawn. They got rid of the e pawn. Bishop f5, queen b3. He went queen b3 first. So you go queen c8 to cover your b pawn. e6. But not really any problems here for Rublevsky. Gets away from the knight. Let's see, where does he get his edge? How is he getting the advantage? So he's trading off his bad bishop for the good bishop on technically good bishop because it's not blocked by his pawns at all. Although the bad bishop on f5, f4 is pretty active, at least on one diagonal. So it's more about, is it active or not? Is it an active bishop, not just is it good or bad theoretically? Okay, kick that one out. Okay, well now he's left with one good bishop there against the knight. Interesting. So he's creating him. Well, now that he's like, hey, we've both opened up the we've both taken toward the center with the h pawns. We have an open h file now. So like, why should I castle kingside if I have this excellent rook right here? So he says, all right, I'll make use of that imbalance. I have control of the h file. So I'll just go for checkmate. I'm trying to set up some checkmate threats along these lines. Get my king over here on the queen side, and double my rooks and checkmate you. Pretty straightforward plan. Going f5. Let's see what he has in mind here. Looks like he's just opening more lines up, and if he trades, he can run the g pawn too. Oh, that's nice. Kick the knight out. Who cares about the triple pawns? We're just trying to open lines. Because theoretically, triple pawns are weaknesses, but if you can get through, that's fine. Oh, wow. What is going on? So he has some queen sacrifice. What do you got? Okay, but that's an interesting little puzzle. What justifies this? What's going to happen next?
I would expect that it would be pawn takes e5.
Pawn's going to take. Okay, now how is black going to win this? I think it's just, yeah, it looks like he has a forced win, actually. Well, we know where he wants to attack, which is where? For Rublevsky.
On the h file.
H file. So he does, so just try to envision it. He doubles his rooks. Now he's trying to get the classic checkmate with the two rooks coming down. This is a big part of it. His tripled pawn is a great asset that he has here because he's covering the light squares. So the only question is, can Dmitry escape on the dark squares? Well, that's part of the reason. That's the whole point of the queen sacrifice. You see that? You guys see the idea? It's a pretty deep idea, but it's essentially he's looking at lines like I talked about with glitch in a line. So you look at a line of trying to double up. You're saying, oh, I want to make that work. Well, there's a glitch, which is that he can play f3, f4, and try to run out. And it's not great for Dmitry, but he's kind of surviving at least. He's holding on. But the idea is after trading, now he can include something. What can he insert into the attack that wasn't before available?
His bishop.
His bishop on the diagonal. So if he moves when he moves the f pawn, bishop reaches c5. So essentially, you're not giving that as an out for the king. The rook can go there. That's fine. The rook will just congest things. So he'll be congested, and the two rooks are. Well, you're going to double your rooks, threatening the mate with rook h1 and rook h2. But then the second he moves his f pawn, you toss in your check. Fortunately, there's no good counter checks. Nothing that what is it? Nikonov has. So that's it. You guys see the checkmate idea? How it's going to play out? Yeah, it's pretty elegant. I like that. Yeah, he just resigned. He knows he's a grandmaster. No, actually, no. Well, Rublevsky's a grandmaster, but yeah, he knows he can't handle that. I mean, basically, can we make a move? Let me see if it lets us move. No, you can't. I have to go to analysis, but you can see if the pawn pushes, you simply check, rook blocks, and then we have our typical mate with a rook check and a check. But he never got to go to the dark squares. You keep him stuck in the mating net. Nice, huh? So that's yeah, nothing too drastic, It just showed he just showed a better understanding, but he had, in both cases, they had d5 and c5. Now he actually makes a trade. So they handled it different, they understand obviously queen's pawn openings very well. To get to the grandmaster level, they have to master those types of openings. So he just looked for different opportunities that they had, such as, in this case, it was the interesting idea of provoking him to take and then doing the same to his opponent. I guess he should have, in hindsight, he probably should have gone to e3. But when he went here, somehow, yeah, everything went wrong for him, and he just, again, like I said, we see a big imbalance between the, asymmetry in terms of their strengths. So yeah, 2370, like what was he's 2692, so 300-point difference. Yeah, and you can see his outclassed him there. So yeah, really nice one. Okay, so does that give you a better idea of how to handle the London system with the d5 c5 thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can look at it again. Look at it more. You can look at that Carlson game, get a better idea of it. Just look through a few more. But try out 365chess.com. Do the same thing, but you'll see there's a thing where it says first it'll show you most recent games, and you scroll down a little bit, it'll show you played most frequently by or something like that. So you'll see, and then you might see, let's say for example, I've done that with Rublevsky, literally for Queen's Gambit. Okay, so you got like 50 games by Rublevsky and some Queen's Gambit accepted line, or you take on c4. And you look at, okay, his peak was like what, maybe in the 90s. So like, okay, 94 game by like 3 wins in a row in 94. You look at like 3 or 5 games, and then you already have a pretty good sense of how to handle it. So Almost there. Okay, so we got, let's do the English opening now, right? So English. So the same thing, we'll go to Explorer. Okay, so you guys understand the process though so far? So you go to Explorer, and we have a filter for master games. You could actually do my game, or you can prepare for someone too. So a lot of times their games, if you're playing someone in a tournament, maybe they're not going to be listed in like an official database. But you can, if you can find them on chess.com, you look up their name, and if you can find them here, you can see how they play against certain openings. Like, oh, I'm going to play the Slav. What do they do? And you could kind of cook up something for them. So that's one of the good things and the bad things about opening preparation, because they'll do it against you as well. Okay, so I like chess 960s too, because there's no opening preparation. Fisher random chess, just randomized pieces. So that's kind of fun too. But there is this whole universe of chess openings. So we got master games. Okay, so looking at the English. Now I'll show you what I like to play against it. So C4, E5 is the most common. I mean, you get so many different things. Usually there's a few main things. They'll either do the symmetrical English, try to meet you in the middle, which is going to be slightly better for you, of course, because you have the first move. So symmetry is like, okay, they're trying to equalize. The most aggressive is obviously E5. So you're doing a reverse, that's a reverse Sicilian, because it would be E4 with white and then C5 with black. So you're essentially playing a Sicilian with an extra move, with the first move. So we can look at this if you guys want, because that's the most common stuff you'll see against the English. It'll help you understand this. I used to play the Sicilian a lot, so just reversing it, I understood the English. Just looked at a few lines. Now, otherwise, they'll try and go E6 or C6 and D5. So they'll try and turn it into a D4 opening. So say they go C6 and you bring your knight out or something. Now they're going D5 and they're basically saying, okay, you can play D4 now. And you're playing it. Now you're playing a D4, and now we're back in the Slav territory. So the English is actually, we say, a very transpositional. It can transpose. Similar, you can play knight F3 first move. This is highly transpositional. So ready opening, but for now they can play, I don't know, D5, and you can play C4 as like, it's not even really a gambit, you'll get it back. And then let's say black goes E6. Now you go D4 if you want. And now you're back into D4 opening again. So it's kind of like toying around with different opening orders and kind of seeing what territory you can get into when you know the openings really well. So you could do knight F3 and then get an English, but this is the classic, C4, E5. I like G3, you can do knight C3. I like G3 is second most common move. Score about the same, slightly higher, but G3. So the whole point though is that you want to control the light squares. Kind of like we talked about, Capablanca had the dark squares in that game. In this game, you're playing more for the light squares. So let's say most common move, knight C6 is pretty common. Then knight bishop G2. So you're getting that clamp on these light squares. So they bring out another knight. So the first move, we just look at essentially the main lines. We already have 3 controlling those light squares, right? Pawn and 2 other pieces. So black actually can't even go D5 and break in the center. Just you can take it with whatever. Just take the pawn. It's a free pawn. So you're restrained by getting at least you get your share of the center. You ensure you get at least two of the 4 central squares. Black kind of has 2 here, and then white kind of has 2 central squares here. Oops. Okay. You don't want to go E4. You'll just lose the pawn. Okay. So knight C3. Okay. So most common is bishop C5. Let's see. Well, I'll just show you something aggressive. It's interesting because if you see it, black trying something very aggressive. So, for example, playing F5. A lot of grandmasters have played. Like every time I play English against a grandmaster, almost always they're playing F5 against me. And they like to. I'll show you how they would play against it. So I go knight C3. They would go maybe G6, or a knight comes out first, or it doesn't really make a difference. D6. I played against this guy Azarov, a Russian player. Azarov. I had a pretty good game against him actually. I had like 2 bishops, and then he had a knight and a rook, or 2 bishops and a pawn for a knight and a rook. So I had some compensation, but he ended up like just launching his knight into my position, and his experience, he was able to get me eventually with his endgame technique. But D6, so we go D3, and then now let's say like G6, and that scores pretty well for black. You can see. So we got 6 games played like that. So this is pretty good time to look at the master games now to filter it down. So you see the setup they want. They want to go bishop G7. So we click on view all games. We don't have that many here. But it's definitely, it's pretty good for black. But we'll probably see, depends on how strong the players are. Let's see. Okay, which side do you want to see winning? Do you want to see how white wins or how black wins in that position?
I like to see how white wins in that.
Okay, how to play it. Okay, how to play it from the white perspective. So, well, this is probably an interesting example. We have a 2,500 defeating a 2,600. So he beats someone he had an upset. Let's see. Let me just filter by rating white. So that was Alessio Versace or something. Okay, let's see. Looks like he's yeah, otherwise, I mean, he had a win, a loss, and 2 wins. That's not too bad. And then like some of the lower rated players didn't handle it too well, but the higher rated players actually did pretty well with white. There was just 1 loss, and that was a higher rated player. So that may not necessarily attributable to the opening itself, but just to the fact that Victor is higher rated than Stefan, right? So it looks like some reverse. Yeah, it says reverse Sicilian. Okay, so let's look at the first one. So how does a 2,500, so like a lower level kind of grandmaster player against a little bit of a higher level grandmaster? So it should be a pretty strong game. Pro Chess. Oh, this is actually a Pro League from chess.com, Pro Chess League 2020 actually. So this is really recent. Okay, so C4, E5, G3, D6. Okay, so we got a D6 or E5 and F5 in. It's actually when white plays it, it's called the Grand Prix attack. If white does that against black Sicilian. So essentially it's like a Grand Prix, but played with the black pieces. So getting your light square control. This is a bit contested, but this is definitely under your control. To bring it, you can bring your knight in there anytime you want. Okay, he's going for E4. I actually like to go E3 myself. You can. This is called the great snake variation. Oops, setup. When you go E3, looks like we can't. We're just gonna have to play through it. Won't let us make any other moves. But this is very common too. I read a book and the guy recommended, I think Costin recommended E4 here in this kind of setup. But E3 is definitely one way to go too. It's pretty solid because the thing about E4 is, think about E4. Every time I touch something, it goes to the end. The thing about E4 is you have created a weakness, like we talked about Capablanca's opponent, the D4 square, because you move 2 pawns. When you move 2 pawns too apart from each other, you weaken the square in between them. So sometimes white tries to get more control of that square with his pieces and played for D4. But technically that is a weak square because no pawn can ever guard it again. But he's meeting him in the middle, really going for the light squares here. G2, you don't block your bishop that way. So you can potentially open your bishop up easily with the pawn. Well, there he goes. He's got the D5 control, so he hops in, says, okay, if you want to take it, I just take back with the pawn and kick your knight out. And actually, that could transfer to a C-file attack. You can imagine if your pawn comes to D5, and you have an half open file to C7, you can pile up on the C7 pawn. That often leads to a very uncomfortable position for the defender against C7. Okay, now this is a common idea. So basically, you want to pin the knight and try to enhance your control of D5. It's just kind of uncomfortable to deal with too. Because for example, this move doesn't work. I can't do it. Okay. No. I moved it away from it too. Okay, wait, hold on. Let me press analysis mode and it'll stop doing that. All right, do you guys see it here? So it's just running the computer analysis, but okay, and actually you can do in these analysis positions, so you can press openings and it'll go back to your opening book. But pretty soon we should be out of the book. It actually, okay. No, oops, there it is. So this has been played quite a few times actually. And you can see it's not bad, right? 36% for white. So if you're playing it for white, that's pretty good. So if you're playing it for black, you'd probably want to find a different line to play against. But no, this is pretty common. It really depends on how things go from here. So again, as I was saying with H6 would be a Bloodner. And it won 3 times for white. Because you just take on F6 and they can't, somebody missed it. 2 people missed it, but it looks like you just take on F6 and when the bishop takes back, you remove them from the defense of H6, right? So you always have little tricks like that. And you just won the pawn. And then you can go back. Yeah, it's a free pawn and the king is pretty exposed. So you pin the knight, queen goes up. Okay, in this game, he went rook c1. As you can see, queen d2 scores pretty well, 30%, 31% versus 20%. Rook c1 didn't score as well, but that's how he won in this game. Pretty natural though, get your rook out. And then he takes on f5. So interestingly from this, so see at this point in the opening book, it's not showing any wins. It's showing of these four, it shows 2 draws and 2 wins for black and 4 wins for black with queen b2. But it'll transpose to a different line, you'll see. So bishop takes, now we have a lot of draws here. And there with b4, now we've transposed into something else. And then we have that 1 win. That's the win, I guess, from this game. So b4. Rook centralizes. B. So this is a very common idea in the English. Essentially, you're just enhancing your control of the diagonal. I've done this all the time. Yeah. I used to do this all the time. You can bet usually rooks on b1 to support that. Sometimes you play a4 too to support it even more. But you get your b4, b5, like Capablanca did, but totally different scenario. This is more like a semi-open position because it's not really locked, right? The pawns aren't locked up, but and the position can open easily if you have a pawn break, like here and here. Whereas in Capablanca's game, the pawns were all locked up, right? Where it was like, yeah, here and here, and then we're here, this kind of thing. Okay, so knight goes back. Okay, he breaks in the center. And now we are. So now we're just on this game, right? So we saw how it diverged. You saw the opening tree essentially. And okay, I'll go back to just analysis, I guess. And if you want to, you can have this going. It shows you what quick analysis by the computer says they made the best move or the second best move. You can do it with grandmaster games or with your own games. You can use that function. Okay, so it likes b5. It says it's an equal position, but I think white's the one with a little pressure. See, it's starting to like plus 0.3 or 0.5. So slight advantage. Do you guys understand the centipon advantage thing? In terms of how the computer evaluates. Like if it says plus 0.4. So you guys know how that works kind of, or you want me to just give you a quick explanation of that? You know, centipon. So essentially hundredths of a pawn. That's how the computer, that's how the computer is evaluating. So it might not really be based on material, but it's looking like depth of 18. So it's looking 18 moves deep. And it's saying, okay, the position is worth like half a pawn or like a 0.4, 0.3 pawns up, depending on what happens. But that's based on some very specific line the computer has in mind. It's trying to give the best option for both sides in the line. It says, okay, so if it's anything less than 0.5, okay, it's close to even. So it likes white a little more, and if it goes minus, it'll shade it in black, and it starts going the other direction, and then black would have an advantage. Okay. But yeah, take that with a grain of salt. Okay, so d4, but it just gives you a rough idea. Okay, if it's +2, obviously, okay, it's very good for white. If it's -2, very good for black. Okay, so he bypasses this one. Trades it off, interesting. Trades off the strong bishop there for the knight that wasn't doing nothing. But I think it's because he was sensing that the knight was going to come here and hit the pawn. So is that kind of like that restriction idea, right? So okay, I don't have to really worry about this pawn as much. So now I can go about my business with my knight, support my other knight, hit this pawn. So his central control is looking good, although black should have c6 at some point. Yeah, he should be. See, the computer saying it should have gone c6 to strike back, but he didn't. Now he's maneuvering a bit. Trades. Now he's hitting, see, there's that target on c7. That's another feature of English. So often you get the d5 square, and when your knight hops in, you always have to worry about c7. Probably going to eventually try to roll some more pawns at him too. And the key is, like, a lot of times black is trying to attack you on the king side. So usually in the English, you're playing more on the center or the queen side. So essentially you just want to say, all right, I'm going to stop your attack on the king side, and then I'll win the end game or something. That's kind of the strategy. Or you say, all right, you've created, maybe in this case, black played a little more modestly, but if black is going like throwing all their pawns trying to checkmate you right away, then you say, okay, well, I might actually punch right back and catch your king because he's become overextended. So it's very sophisticated opening, really. There's a lot of deep ideas, and there's definitely some ways where, yeah, as black you can get some quick attacks too. So you can look into that too, how to avoid that if you're playing white, and how to get those if you're playing black. But yeah, definitely the e5, and I'm showing you like the most critical lines where black is really trying to attack. Okay, so now he's hitting the c6 pawn. Okay, breaking it open. Now, actually, apparently that was a mistake. by taking it, but it looked tempting. I've actually made a similar mistake against this young master myself when I was playing in Italy. This is brilliant move. He found this sacrifice. Well, yeah, there's a lot of overloading going on here. So apparently it's saying that white should have lost, but somehow he bailed out here. So now because he is overloading, because he's got the pressure on when he set this up, he's got pressure on the knight. So it looks like he's going to crash through on G3 after the capture. You take the knight. No, he takes F2. Oh, that was his mistake. He messed it up. So he got a little too fancy there with the rook sacrifice, and he had some kind of, I guess he didn't calculate thoroughly that I don't know. It's just a big mess. But it looks like he should have just taken this one. And then he's got, queen takes G3 check. And yeah, the king is just very open. It looks pretty dangerous. And now it's saying, queen invade with the rook. Oh, you can go check, and you can take the other one with check. I mean, it's still hard to win, but it's not very easy. Yeah, at the very least, black has a perpetual check, but not the kind of position you want to play with white. It's very exposed. So, yeah, it rarely will give you a brilliant. So the computer says it's brilliant, but not brilliantly followed through. Executed it. Okay, so check, and he escapes. And now it says it's equal again. Check, and now it says he's better. Okay, what is going on? Check. He just kept on running. So we got 3 pawns for 5. Oh, he's just up a rook, right? He just emerged a rook up, and he just, yeah, that's the thing about attacking. When you're attacking the king, if you let him you have a king hunt, but if you let him run to the other side of the board, sometimes it amounts to nothing. It's essentially what happened here. So he blew it with rook takes F2, looks like. Yeah, a little too fancy for his own good. Okay, so king escapes. Yeah, but that's the thing about the English. You got to be ready for something similar to a dragon. Again, it's like a reverse Sicilian. So if you're playing a dragon with black, you got to be ready to be attacked. You have to handle some very cutthroat positions for both sides. But eventually, yeah, he emerged. He kept his extra knight, and the thing is, he's got his protection on this queening square is covered by the knight and the queen. So as long as he's covering that, then his opponent doesn't have anything quick enough, and then he's got this counter attack coming now. That's usually what happens once he picks up the pawn. Once you can stop your opponent's attack, your counter attack usually wins the day, and then he's going to get a queen himself, and that's game. He's up 30 points according to the computer, 30.4 points up. So winning position. But if that makes sense a little bit, I mean, there's so many lines to look at, but the central ideas are that D5 square really, and you want to an E4 bit. But you really want to play on the light squares, and you got to be ready. Yeah, there's some very aggressive lines. Although I would recommend, that's why I recommend E3. So you can see in the opening book, you can look into you can play knight F3 too, but there's a move E3. Or it said it lost, but as you see, it changes when you look into it a bit. So let's say bishop G7, and then what you can do is see it's 41% now. It actually ends up scoring pretty good for white. I like these lines. And so the kind of one of the tricks to this line is that you want to play F4 eventually. And when you play F4, so you blockade his attack. So you can actually go, I think this is fine. You can castle, and you're seeing that it's scoring really nice. And then again, you can look at Master Games at some point here. Oh, we're not in Explorer though. We'd have to go back to Explorer again, look at the Master Games. But you can see it's scoring pretty well. And they like to do this Rook B1 thing. Actually, there's actually a Kasparov game. A Kasparov and a Carlsen game is white out of this exact same position, I think, with B3, because I studied this quite a bit, this type of, because you have to know this. This is very aggressive for black. So if you're playing as white, you got to make sure you know these kinds of things. Something like this. And you could find some very strong players playing this. And yeah, we'd have to, they're not actually showing us the games. Oh, here you go, 9 games. That's essentially the same thing. And then Master Games, we would filter, and I could send you the link if you want. Rating white, let's see who's played this. We have like a 2,500 beating a 2,400. We have some draws too. And yeah, so you see different levels of master players, but the top players haven't played like this, so it's kind of like offbeat. But yeah, that's just an idea of how you can look at the top players, flip through. Okay, see how they lost, so you know what not to do. I mean, Joel was Lautier is very strong. So that's how to win with black. And then if you look at the second one, how to win with white. So do you want me to just send you that link so you can look at that, Patrick?
Okay.
I think it should work. It's from a search, technically. So yeah, if you put in that long link, I'll put it in the chat, then hopefully it will actually show you all those games on chess.com. Yeah, but just the key is, just look through, start with the statistics, look through the opening, and then filter it by rating based on which side you want to see it from, and you can get a sense. Do you guys have any questions about that? How to do that, or anything at all from tonight? Does that make sense? The positional ideas, kind of breaking down the differences, the imbalances between the two sides, and look at master games. The key is like when you're looking at those master games, like, okay, look at the classics, but like I said, it could be a modern game too. So you'll end up with 19 something or late 1900s and 2000, and you'll also get like 1895 or something. So you'll see the whole range. You can filter by date as well. It's kind of fun just to look at those. Again, you see a big asymmetry between the two players. So when you look at like a Capablanca or Stein as like one of the first world champions that were way ahead of their time, and you'll see them, or like Morphy, and you'll see them just blow their opponent out of the water. That's kind of useful too, because I mean, you guys will get to do that as well as you're working your way up. So let's say you're playing these college matches, and you'll get some tough players, but you'll get other players who just don't really understand the opening. So if you have a really nice understanding of the opening, you can definitely crush a lot of people. That's the nice thing about opening preparation. You can win, but more importantly is if you have that fundamental understanding and your tactics are strong, you're good at attacking, then you could, regardless of how well you know the opening, you'll still do well. But it is good to have a few in your repertoire, know a few openings, know how to handle those annoying systems like the London system. And beyond that, it's all, if you have the fundamental understanding, how to create those imbalances, how to handle them, how to plan, know how to create that better position, and then get the tactics that come out of it, exploit, pounce on those, execute, pounce when those tactics come, then you'll be fine. But it's just another, one phase of the game that, it is what it is. It's that the opening starts this way. So unless you're playing chess 960, you kind of have to memorize a few, unfortunately. But so nice work, guys. Okay, so you're gonna kind of just do some homework, look at your openings that you play, and I can also just, if you guys want to look at some more classics, I could send your way. I could send you, or actually, I'll just send you guys here. I'll just on Lee Chess, I have some. It's like weaknesses. I created a study on weaknesses, and I just pulled some top game, some really instructive games. So if you're going to study, have you guys ever used that function on leechess.org? Studies. So you can look up studies here. It's really useful. If you go to all studies, you can see like, okay, so they've created all the games from the 2020 championship that's going on right now. So you guys can watch those games. You can look it up in other places too. Norway Chess had some great games. And then you have people like making puzzles on forks and stuff. Just a lot of, open source site, people just helping each other out. So it's a great resource. And then, so under my studies, I created one on, let me see, I have one on Zugzwang's, positional sacrifices is pretty useful. If you guys want to see sacrifices. But the weaknesses one, I spent a lot of time on that to pull some really nice games together from grandmasters, how to create and exploit weaknesses. And a lot of positional concepts in that too. Okay, so I'll shoot you guys that link. And yeah, I guess if you guys want to play some practice games against each other, I think I have to get going, but you guys can play practice games or you're going to go for on Thursday. Are you guys chest out for now? Was that an information overload for to get to back?
There's a lot of good stuff. Thank you. First off.
Absolutely. Well, you guys probably have homework too, huh?
Yeah, I'm wondering if dinner's ready, so I'll see about that first. But
yeah, gotta get some calories in you. All right, guys. Nice work. So I'll see you. I'm not sure if we're doing next Monday or 2 weeks from now or something, but yeah, I'll be in touch with Anthony and figure out the next one.
All right.
In the meantime, check out the study with some good Grandmaster games and just keep on, try out that function, analyze your games after you play them, use that analysis thing. And then as you're going through each time, use the opening function too. So you'll use the computer analysis, get an idea of what you did correctly and not, and also just get a sense of, okay, filter for top games. Because then then that way you'll get to actually look at some really instructive Grandmaster games. And just shoot me any questions if you guys, just email me, and if you guys have any questions about how the process or any games you come across. And like, be like, okay, what is going on with this Shirov, some complex player like Shirov or Fisher or something. Like, what are they doing here? If you want to know, I'll try to answer it. All right, guys. Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
See ya.